So for an introduction, I'm Brian Parsons. I'm a UX designer at Sony PlayStation. I've been at PlayStation since 2018. A few years ago, PlayStation created a dedicated accessibility team for the platform, which includes the PS5 console. Our motto is play has no limits. So at PlayStation, we strive to create a gaming experience without barriers that fits the needs of players of all abilities. We use technology to advance products and services for our PlayStation community and to guide our mission to connect the world through the power of play. So when we created this team, the lead product manager, Satish Upaluri, came up with this strategy of 3 key pillars that we needed to focus on to make our ecosystem accessible. The first pillar was the PlayStation Studios game developers. The second was the PS5 console. And the third was a controller that allowed people with a wide variety of abilities to play. With the PS Studios games, they've had a recent string of releases that have been incredibly accessible and successful. The first was The Last of Us Part 2, which was released in June 2020, with the latest being God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, which Sam will talk about in a little bit. The reason the studios are so accessible, along with the PS5, is because we meet regularly. Mark Friend from our UX research team in London has set up a periodic call between these studios, as well as some others, and the PlayStation 5 accessibility team, which I am a part of. We share information, we ask questions, we take feedback from the studios and try to implement new features to make the games more accessible from an ecosystem level. So the accessibility journey of the PS5, we launched in November of 2020 with 11 accessibility features, and it was far better than the previous generation of the PS4. Soon after the release, we ran an accessibility unboxing study where we went in the homes of gamers with disabilities. We gave them a PS5. We watched them unbox it, set it up, and start playing for over 2 weeks. We collected feedback, and that helped us define our strategy for the next 2 to 3 years. We've kept on releasing features with every major release, with the last one being haptic feedback, so you can navigate through the PlayStation 5 with the vibration of the controller to help you, and also the ability to use a second controller as one player. The third part is the controller itself. So now I want to tell you about that story. When we entered in the initial design phase and doing our research, we looked at the statistics of physical disabilities. And what we found is that there is a tremendous diversity in the types and manifestations of physical disabilities. No two people experience a debilitating condition in exactly the same way. Further, the disabilities themselves are dynamic and capable of regressing or progressing over time. We needed to make a controller that was both flexible and could change with you as you grow older. To do that, we enlisted the help of different community groups. Able Gamers, Special Effects, and Stack Up are just a few of the groups that we partnered with to reach out to gamers with disabilities to find out what the needs were for them to play at their highest level. We also used
We
consultants who
also used
specialized in
consultants
the
who
area.
specialize in the
Paul
area,
Lane,
full
my
stop.
favorite
Paul Cat Macro Lane,
consultant of all
comma, my
time. He's
favorite of all time,
self-described
full
as the
stop. He
gift
is
of gab.
self-described as the gift of
Gave us
gab.
great feedback throughout the process. Cesar Flores, uh, also throughout the process, and our own internal employee, Sam Schaffel. So on top of community groups, consultants, we also had the general population of gamers with disabilities. And throughout the several years we created the access controller, we had 24 participants from Japan, 36 from the United States, and 22 from the UK. So this was really a global effort to find everyone we could who could help us give input. So with all this input, we narrowed it down to three key design principles on what we needed to focus on. The first was holding and using this controller. We saw people using their feet, using their neck, you name it, people use the controller in a way to game. We needed to figure out how they would do it themselves. So we built for easy access. So the controller can be placed at any 360-degree orientation on different flat surfaces, such as a wheelchair tray, or attached to an AMPS pattern mount. The second principle was accuracy of pressing buttons. So we have a wide range of buttons, large button caps in a variety of shapes and sizes that can be freeform positioned and mapped to inputs for most effective use. We also have multiple joysticks. These adjustable stick buttons give you a wide range of inputs and flexibility when maneuvering your characters in game. And the last thing I'll talk about is the collaborative use of the access controller. Multiple controllers can be used together as a single virtual controller, whether that's two access controllers together, an access controller and a DualSense, or two access controllers and one DualSense. So the last piece of the puzzle was packaging. We created packaging that you could open with one hand, and all the kit components are organized in a single layer, so it's easy to pick them up and add them to the controller. So the adaptive controller kit, it works right out of the box to allow many disabled gamers to play more comfortably after 1 to 2 weeks of immersion. And now to Sam from Insomniac.
Thanks, Brian. Let me switch over to screen share and the PowerPoint that I have. Hi, so my name is Sam Schaffel. I'm an accessibility design researcher at Insomniac Games. I'm here to talk about accessibility on Marvel's Spider-Man 2. To give a brief introduction about me, I started in June 2018 working accessibility QA and dev support on Last of Us Part 2. And then from there, I worked with Santa Monica Studio on God of War Ragnarok as an associate UX accessibility designer. And then most recently, I worked as an accessibility design researcher with Insomniac Games on Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which launched in October. So for us, Insomniac's vision is to create games that have a positive and lasting influence on people's lives. And we feel like this fits incredibly well with accessibility. So it just seemed like a natural thing for us to do and a real just part of our philosophy and core beliefs. So over time, we took that philosophy and we grew it, and we have this representation here, which is a loop, but really it can go in any order. And we started that with the culture, by advocating and talking to folks and creating monthly meetings, working with folks like Brian and Mark Friend at SIE to kind of have those knowledge shares and build empathy and understanding in how we can address the concerns of different gamers. And we worked with advocates and brought advocates in to talk and consult, and just gamers with disabilities who weren't consultants as well. And then we got to integration. So we took all this feedback and all this inspiration, and we started to think about, okay, well, what kind of things can we build into the core design? What kind of things will we make into features? How can we solve these issues, these blockers for folks? And then we also have representation. So we have characters with disabilities in our games. We have Haley Cooper, who was introduced in Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, who's deaf and uses ASL. And then we have Rivet in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. She was introduced in that game, and she has a missing limb. So we wanted to make sure that these accessibility needs were represented in an accurate light. So we worked with different groups such as Respectability and other folks, Hypernovas for ASL, and as well as consultants. They were fantastic, and they helped ensure that we represented these characters authentically in all the work that we do. And then, of course, we have staffing. We have myself, who is the accessibility design researcher who joined last year in 2022. And then we also have Thor Gass, who is our amazing accessibility UI programmer. So yeah, that's kind of how we've kind of progressed over time, starting with Marvel's Spider-Man back in 2018. This is how we've grown the accessibility features. So in Marvel's Spider-Man, we had about 7 or 8 features. And then in Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered and Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, we grew that to over 30. And with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, we grew that to over 50. And then with Marvel Spider-Man 2, we got to over 60, with more coming in our December update, which I will talk about at the end. So sometimes, though, we don't use features, we use built-in accessibility. So on the left, you see a representation from Marvel's Spider-Man, where we're using the Black Cat minigame, where you have to search the environment. It's a pixel hunt, essentially, to find this Black Cat doll figure. And you can use visual feedback, and you can also use haptic feedback. And here it is in action. So we use hot and cold haptics to enable players to detect it one of 2 different ways in this case. And then you zoom in, and he found the figure. So we improved this Marvel's Spider-Man 2 because we also have an audio layer that beeps, and basically the speed of the beeps increases the closer you get to the object. So now I'm going to play that for you. So that's just one of the ways that we built on accessibility inherently in our scan mechanics between games. We also basically have 4 different types of features. We have ports from previous games, feature improvements, game-specific features, and new features. And here you can see in our control settings, we kind of have examples of each one. So we have some ports. We have the one moment. We have the invert look control, which is a port from game to game. Pretty straightforward in how that gets ported over, so that players can choose 4 different ways to invert their looks. And then with the right stick. And then we also have repeated button presses, which enables, taps turning into holds, again, a relatively straightforward port. But then we have new features like continuous dodge, which instead of pressing the dodge button in order to just dodge once and having to repeatedly press it to dodge repeatedly, um, it allows you to hold the button down to dodge multiple times. Then we have other things. We have game-specific features like our web wings and our invert web wing control, which is very, very specific to Marvel's Spider-Man and one of the new mechanics we introduced, which was the web wings. And then we have some new features, again, like the continuous dodge, but also our melee mode is kind of a new feature, and I'm going to explain why that is in the next slide. So even though some might think of it as a port from a previous game, it is a totally different type of feature because the combat system in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, where it originated, is very different from the combat system in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. In Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, when you pressed the melee button, you executed a multi-hit combo, which I'll show now. And that was pretty much the extent of it. We took this and worked with the combat and gameplay teams and expanded upon it. In Marvel's Spider-Man 2, there is a combo mode where you can execute a 4-hit combo that can be altered by doing hold attacks, as well as certain things like dodging in the middle of your combo. But there's also the continuous mode, which essentially allows you to toggle it on and continuously melee, and then toggle it off to stop. And here's an example of using the continuous melee mode with just 3 inputs, essentially toggling it on, dodging, and then holding for an air launcher. And the melee mode executes the rest. So yeah, I don't even know how many hits that was, but however many hits that was, it was just 3 presses. Had to be at least 20. Not sure though. We also improved some features. So we have our look at waypoint feature, which points the camera towards visual waypoints in the environment, which in open spaces works great because you can just parkour over whatever your obstacle is and reach your destination. But for indoor spaces, it's a little bit different because you have more limited movement. You have to enter doorways and go a very specific path to reach your objective. And then for that one, we decided to use breadcrumb waypoints where we have little waypoints that don't show up visually, but that work with look at waypoint to point you to that doorway that you have to enter, or around the bend in a linear path. And then for combat, we thought about what are the waypoints. So one of the major advancements for Marvel Spider-Man 2 with our waypoint system in combat is if you use look at waypoint in combat scenarios, it points to the closest enemy. And here's an example of using that to navigate the space in a stealth scenario. So there was one ping, and then the Talon drone was taken down. Then another ping and an enemy, and then another ping and a third enemy. And in that way, you can kind of navigate the space from enemy to enemy to clear out the room or the arena. Another thing that we've had in previous games that we expanded upon was our shortcuts. So there's a bunch of different types of these. There's things to quickly toggle things on and off, such as toggling on and off our high contrast mode so that you can use the shaders to light up certain enemies or environmental objects, but then you can quickly turn it off with a button press when you don't want to use it, and then turn it back on whenever you need. There's another way to turn holds into a single input press. So you don't have to hold down the square button to do an air launcher or a swing kick. You can just press one of the shortcuts to execute it. And then chord buttons, which are inputs that require 2 or more buttons pressed simultaneously, such as our finishers. You can map those to shortcuts as well. And then features such as game speed, which enable you to choose your level of slowdown. So you have game speed at 30%, 50%, and 70%. And you can choose to put either one of those on a shortcut to toggle between having the game slowed down to approach stealth or combat or puzzle navigation at your own pace. And then you can just turn it off when you're finished and resume the game at 100% speed. We have over 20 shortcuts in this game. And one of the great things that you can do is coming up in December with the launch of the Access controller, you can map a couple shortcuts to the 2 inputs that we provide, but you can also map a variety of chord buttons and holds directly to the Access controller and map it to a profile so that you can take however many of these shortcuts you wish to use beyond the 2 mapped to the controller and map them to an Access controller um, profile and switch between them and have your Marvel Spider-Man 2 Access controller profile. So that is going to be really exciting when that comes in December. Another thing I wanted to highlight was our work with consultants. So we worked with a number of consultants over the development of Marvel Spider-Man 2. We worked with Paul Lane and Josh Straub for motor accessibility. We worked with James Rath for low vision accessibility and Chris Robinson for hearing accessibility. And some of the features that came out of those consultations were auto heal, touchpad in combat, which enables players to turn off the touchpad during combat scenarios so that they don't accidentally enter a menu during intense combat situations. And then continuous dodge, which again allows you to hold the input to dodge multiple times instead of having to press it multiple times. And caption customization, which will be coming in our December update, which will allow players to select a caption color, caption size, background color, and background opacity, all separately from the subtitles. So yeah, a few of the things I was alluding to are for our December 2023 title update, which includes Screen Reader, which will have a status shortcut that reads HUD information such as health, focus, abilities, and gadgets available, and a ton of more things, as well as repeat delay and repeat delay scale for the screen reader, so you can customize how often this information repeats, and volume customization. For audio descriptions, we have audio descriptions for all of our cinematics and QuickTime QTEs, as well as volume customization for those, and then captions, which I just mentioned before, with all those customization options, and all the other features such as touchpad in combat, high contrast outlines, UI holds, and so much more. So please look forward to that becoming available in December of this year. Thank you very much.